What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Literally Nothing But Everything podcast with your host, the one and only Mike Rispoli. And first things first, I want to give a big shout out to my friend Ella, who joined me last week. Thank you so much for being on. It was a great episode. I really had a lot of fun talking with you. If you haven't checked that episode out, I highly suggest that you do. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that we talked about. We talked about the toxicity of relationships, which then led to our hatred of dating apps, and then that led into Taylor Swift and why we don't like her, which I feel like I kind of have to give a rest to for a little bit because she's got that I can make you disappear money. So I think I should probably cool it a little bit, talking some shit about her. But there was also some stuff that I learned about Ella that I hadn't previously known before we had recorded the podcast. So that was also a lot of fun. And since that episode, I had a few other friends reach out to me and said that they want to do it with me. So now my plan is I think I'm going to try and have one of my friends on at least once or twice a month just to kind of help break up the monotony of just being by myself. Plus, also, I think it's a good way for me to kind of hang out with my friends, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I mean, I gotta be honest, it was actually a lot easier doing it with a guest than trying to do this solo. I mean, I can only talk my shit for so much, so having a guest on really kind of helped me just mentally because I didn't have to think so hard about what I was going to try and say and all that stuff. So again, thanks for coming on, Ella. It was a great time. And also, if I gained any new listeners, we're glad to have you here. I appreciate you listening. And that's kind of what we do here. I just kind of run my yap and talk my shit. Just like everybody else who thinks that they can do a podcast. Hopefully you like what you hear if you are a new listener. And if you're one of my OG listeners, then I appreciate you listening. I really do. The more that I can get out there, the better that this thing can do, the happier I'll be. And hopefully then the more content that I could put out with the more time that I have with it. But unfortunately for you guys, this week I don't have a guest, so you're stuck with just me. So anyways, how was your week? You guys do anything crazy? You guys trying to just futz through the mundane bullshit of work? Yeah, me too. Even though I just started my new job, I'm still trying to get my footing in. I think it takes about like 4 months for you to fully get immersed into your job. I don't know why. I feel like 4 months, that's like when you truly learn, not like the trade that you're in or whatever, but I think it truly kind of helps you figure out the little nuances of the company, what you're going to be doing, how things run, all that stuff. So I'm still trying to just get my footing here. But did you guys have a good weekend? My weekend ended up being crazy. I only did something on Friday, but holy crap, did it turn into a wild turn of events. So it actually ended up being one of my friend's birthday. And I know previously I've talked some shit about birthdays, but as much as I don't enjoy like dealing with my own birthday, I don't think my birthday is that big of a deal. I do enjoy celebrating other people's birthday because it just kind of helps give you an excuse to go do some wild shit, and that's exactly what ended up happening. I actually didn't even know it was my friend's birthday. It tells you how good of a friend I am. But I just happened to text him asking if he wanted to go out, and he was like, yeah, absolutely, let's do it. And I'm just thinking it's a normal day. We get to the bar and he mentioned that it's his birthday. I'm like, oh, happy fucking birthday. I didn't know that. So we started at the bar that I worked at, so that way we could also see some of our friends who were working that night, and that way they could also enjoy some of the festivities. But then we found out that one of our friends, who's also a bartender at that bar, now works at a different bar. So we went over there, but the bar that he works at now is actually the bar that my grandfather used to own and run. So we go over there, and when we get in, I'm just kind of sitting in the booth, and I'm just reminiscing about my grandfather. Like, I'm just imagining him behind the bar and what it must have been like back then. So it was kind of surreal for me because I just felt this connection with my grandfather at this place. And I mean, my grandfather passed away in 2019, and not a day goes by that I don't miss him. So for me, that was just like another way for me to connect with him. So that was kind of a surreal moment for me. And the only difference is that I could tell you from what I know is because apparently the layout of the bar is all the same. Nothing has changed from the time that my grandfather stopped owning it until now. So that's kind of crazy. And the only main difference I could tell you is the windows are no longer yellow with cigarette smoke. So my grandfather's also the one who put in the shuffleboard table at that place. And according to everybody around us, that shuffleboard is the best shuffleboard in the area. And I think it's because of the rules that are taped up above it that say you're not allowed to have a drink in your hand while you're playing, and you're not allowed to put a drink on the shuffleboard. And those are actually rules that my grandfather implemented, so that way the shuffleboard would never get ruined or damaged. So that was kind of cool, just seeing that even though my grandfather was no longer there and at the bar, that his spirit was still kind of there, given the sense that the rules have never changed. But to kind of give you a sense of my grandfather, there's one story that my dad always likes to tell where when my dad was a kid, he used to help clean up the bar with my grandfather. And my grandfather, as like a treat to my dad, he would always like drop coins or $1 or whatever it would be. And the rule is that whatever money you find on the floor, you're able to keep. And one day my dad finds a 20 and he goes over to my grandfather and he's just like, "Oh my gosh, did you mean to drop this 20?" And my grandfather was like, "Hell no. If I had seen that 20, I would have grabbed it." But one thing I did notice when I was talking to my friend over on the side of the bar, I was looking behind it just to see what was going on, and there was no stool there. Because from what I know, my grandfather, he was only like 5'7", so he wasn't the biggest guy in the room. So he used to have a stool behind the bar that if somebody was getting rowdy, he could just step on the stool and grab somebody from like over the bar if he had to. Or even if he had to, he would use the stool to jump over it in case somebody like really needed to get thrown out. So, but considering the fact that the bartenders there now are like 6 foot or taller, there's no real issue with reach. But also, fun facts, if you want to know a little bit about history about Greenwich, Connecticut, that bar is also the first time that there was ever an armed robbery in Greenwich, from my understanding. Because back in the 50s when my grandfather was running it, it was like right around closing time, and this group of like 3 people come in. I think he said 2 were guys and 1 was a woman. They all came in and they ordered a pizza. And my grandfather was like, all right. And then by the time my grandfather comes back out of the kitchen, the people now have guns drawn at him and they're robbing the place. Now, I have to ask my dad the full details of the story. I don't know if he was tied up or anything like that, but I do know that I think he was thrown into the back room. And at the time he had a partner. His partner's name was Charlie. I don't know if that guy's still alive. If you are, shout out to Charlie. And they actually robbed the place so bad that they didn't even leave a dime on the floor. So there was nothing for my dad to pick up. My dad obviously wasn't there. My dad wasn't even born yet. But the worst part about the story isn't the fact that they took all of the money out of the register and they took all of the money off the floor, so my grandfather couldn't even call the cops. But at the time, my grandfather was also in the process of building his house. So he also had cash on him. Now keep in mind, this is the 1950s. So my grandfather had like $500 in his pocket so that way he could pay the workers that were like building his house. And they took the $500 too. And I don't know about you, but $500 now to me is a lot. And who knows what that would be with inflation nowadays. So then I guess once they leave, Charlie decides to run out after them and he starts chasing them down. My grandfather's like, "You're not going to get anywhere with that." So my grandfather just walked up the street, went to the police station and reported it. But unfortunately, they couldn't do anything about it because from what I think, they were wearing ski masks. So my grandfather couldn't really give a good description. So the group ended up getting away. But then either a couple weeks later or maybe a month later, they ended up catching the people. And the reason they caught them was because they ended up fucking robbing some other place. So in the end, it actually ended up working out because karma's a bitch. Man, my grandfather was one of the most interesting people. I mean, I feel like you could also probably say the same thing about your grandparent, only for the fact that they had to endure so much back in the days when they were young. I mean, maybe your grandparents immigrated to this country and they have a story about that, or even hearing about the times when they were growing up, maybe in the Depression if they were young enough, and then maybe having to serve in World War II. Maybe some of your grandparents served in Korea. Who knows? I mean, guys, by just talking with your grandparents, there is so much history and knowledge that you could learn just from them. And instead of just thinking that your grandparents are crazy for thinking some certain way, maybe actually have a true conversation with them and try and gain a sense of where they might be coming from. Like, seriously, do not take your grandparents for granted, because one day they're going to be gone and you're going to miss them like I do. But in the case of the grandfather that I'm speaking about, he ended up becoming an orphan at the age of 13, was raised by his brother. By the age of 17, he enlisted in the Navy because World War II was going on, and the reason why he enlisted at 17 is because if you enlisted, you weren't drafted, and you actually got to choose which branch of the military you wanted to be in. And the reason he chose the Navy is because he was like, I didn't really feel like walking. But then during the war, his boat actually got torpedoed by the Japanese. But what's kind of wild is that day, according to my grandfather, from what I remember, he ends up getting into a fight with one of his crewmates. And when the boat gets torpedoed, I can't remember if my grandfather ended up pulling that guy out of the water or if that guy ended up pulling up my grandfather out of the water. So there's a little lesson for you about putting your differences aside. And I know that my grandfather served later in the war, so if the war ended in 45 and he's owning this bar in 1950, there's probably about a 5 to 7 year gap from the time that his boat gets torpedoed up until the time that he also gets robbed at fucking gunpoint. So I don't know what you guys think, but to me, that seems like a crazy sequence of events, and it's also kind of a wild story. But speaking of wild stories, sorry, I gotta get a fucking new chair. Trust me, if it's fucking driving me crazy, I can only imagine how crazy it's driving you guys. But, birthday boy, after we're done hanging out at the bar for a bit, he decides, hey, why don't we go to a strip club? And we all know my fucking feelings on strip clubs. I think they're skeevy. I think they're degrading. I am not a fan. I always told myself that I would probably never go to one. But then everybody that we were with was like, oh yeah, we're all going to go. So then FOMO set out. So Mikey Hypocrite here ended up going too. And when we get there, all of my like initial reactions about strip clubs ended up being exactly what I thought it was going to be. The first thing that I noticed is all the seats besides the bar stools was all velvet. So my first thought is, oh my God, I feel so bad for the person who has to clean up after this. I mean, getting a stain out of carpet's hard enough. I can only imagine what velvet's like. So we're all sitting down, we're watching the chicks dance, and they all got their fishnet outfits on, and there's nothing left to the imagination. And I'm sitting down with like the group of people that we're with, and I noticed that birthday boy's not around. So then I start walking around looking for him, and I notice that he's in like the VIP room, which I guess is where they offer all the private dances. And he's chatting up some of the girls, and he's just like, yo, I really like that one. So then they bring her over, and she's got her full titty just popped out of her bra. So another girl comes over, and she pops it back in for her. And my friend looks over and goes, hey, you can't go backwards into the plot here. Like, what is this? So we're chatting, and one of the girls, I'll say, was honestly one of the hottest women I've ever seen in my life. So we do introductions, and for the life of me, I cannot remember her name. But we're sitting down, we chat for a bit, and the eventual question of, do you want a private dance comes up. Now, we got there with like an hour before close. At this point, we only got like 30 minutes because I think the place closed at like 2 and we were there like, at this point it was 1:30. So I'm like, twist my arm. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. And I'm Italian, so I may as well get the full experience here. Plus, it doesn't help that big booty Latinas are my absolute weakness. And this mocha latte was a drink I could sip on all day. So I'm like, all right, well, how long did the dances last? And she goes, they're about 15 minutes. And I'm like, oh, cool. But what are we going to do for the remaining 14? So we go into the room and she closes the curtain and she tells me to sit down on the couch. And I'm just like, I would rather sit anywhere else. I mean, firm or soft. I now realize that there's a third option of stiff, if you know what I mean. So I sit down and within seconds, I'm like, all right, I get this now, because this woman is just giving me a full body massage with everything but her hands. And in my head, I'm just like, and it feels like the first time. But I'm also like awkward as hell because I'm just trying to enjoy it. And even though we're in this setting, I'm really trying to not just make her feel like an object, like most guys probably do. So finally, after like 5 minutes, she's like, enjoy yourself. And she just grabs my hands. And now I'm like, our Father who art in heaven. Yeah, thy kingdom def gonna come, all right. I mean, you keep grinding like that. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Let me tell you guys, she had some great lips and we weren't kissing. Oh, Mikey innuendos over here. But after a few minutes, she's like, how you feeling? And I'm like, honestly, I'm just happy to be here. Which ended up getting her to laugh. But I had this absolute dime rubbing up all over me. And I'm also like, let me see what she's all about. Because, I mean, you're going to be doing this. You may as well take me out to dinner first, right? Like, let me get to know you a little bit. So I'm like, how long have you been, like, working at the strip club? And she goes, just about a month. I'm like, do you like it? And she's like, not really. And I'm like, then why the hell are you doing it? And she goes, how much did you pay again? I'm like, all right, touche. So she's like, "You're funny." I'm like, "Yeah, not just looking." So as she's doing her thing and we're kind of still chatting, she's telling me that she's a little self conscious because she has a quote unquote medium sized ass. And I'm like, what the fuck does that supposed to mean? Because I'm just sitting here being like, this woman is absolutely gorgeous. And she is thick in all the right places. And I mean, you could definitely tell that she works out. So me being me, I asked her, I'm like, yo, what is your workout routine? And she laughs, but I'm like low key serious. And it's a little sad, but now I'm kind of thinking she probably felt self-conscious about herself. So the reason why she's doing this is just for some like self-verification or self-validation purposes. And I don't want to speculate or assume, but I'm just like, wow, it's sad that you have to do something like this in order for you to feel some sort of like self-verification about yourself. But the dance ends and I walk out with this big ass grin on my face. I mean, for the past 15 minutes, I just had this absolute dime rubbing up all over me. So I gotta say, I did enjoy it. I'm not gonna lie. But like 30 seconds later, my friend who's the birthday boy comes out and he just looks like he's seen a ghost. I mean, Casper was more tan than this motherfucker. So I'm just like, dude, what the hell happened in there? And he's just like, oh my God. That was the craziest thing ever. She was slapping me in the face with her pussy. And I'm just like, oh my God, so that's not a booger on your face? So the club is closing and we all leave. But the group that I'm with is like, they want to continue the party. So they want to go to a different bar that's in New York because bars in New York are open until 4 and in Connecticut they're open until 2. So they want to continue like hanging out. Plus, they said that some of the strippers might go out with them. And I'm like, guys, I'm exhausted. I'm fucking out of here. And it's funny because Ella's with us and she's just like, oh, you just don't want to hang out with the strippers? They're people too, you know. But I'm like, I have no problem with the strippers. I just had one all over me. I actually wanted to leave at like 12:30, but you guys dragged my ass out here. And then she was like, oh, okay, never mind. But I just went home. And right when I got home, the first thing I did was I just fucking jumped right into the shower and I threw my clothes in the wash. And no, it wasn't because I had some stripper rubbing up all over me. It was just more the fact that I was probably sitting on some jizz-stained couch and I just felt disgusting. And what I realized is I was able to wash away the grime, but I was not able to wash away the shame of being there. But with that said, if my friends wanted to go out there again, I don't think I'm going to be so reluctant. But all right, let me ask you guys this. Now that I popped my cherry and I finally went to a fucking strip club, what are all of your strip club stories? Do you guys have any crazy wild stories from a strip club? Because that was my first and only experience so far. So I can only imagine what you guys have to say. Oh my gosh. But all right, so besides my friend's birthday, there's actually a couple other things to celebrate because my sister actually ended up just getting engaged. So congrats to her. And I also somehow found a way to kind of, I didn't ruin it. I didn't ruin the engagement. I wasn't even there for when he proposed. But I always find a way to somehow be involved with my sister's engagement stories. What happened with one of my sisters, she got engaged back in 2019. And I was actually living in Rhode Island at the time. And my sister was living in the same apartment complex as me. So I'm actually doing laundry. And when I closed the door to go put my laundry down to the basement, because that's where the machines were, I locked myself out when I closed the door. Typical me fashion. I tend to have a fucking history of locking myself out. Actually, one time when I was in Rhode Island, I locked myself out of my apartment and because I was doing laundry again. And thank God it was the summer. So what I ended up doing was I took out my air conditioner in the window because it was a 1-story apartment. So it was just like one big like complex, but it wasn't like multiple levels. So I was on the ground floor. So I'm able to take out my air conditioner. And as I'm throwing one of my legs into my window so I can get into my apartment, I'm turning the rest of my body to get the rest of myself in. I see this woman just turn the corner and we lock eyes. And she just looks at me and I can see the confusion in her eyes. And I'm just like, don't worry, I live here. And I jump in and I slam the window shut. So anyways, back to the original story. I ended up locking myself out when my sister got engaged. But in my defense, how the fuck am I supposed to know that's happening? So I'm trying to call her because she had a key to my apartment for when shit like this happens. And I'm calling her. She's not picking up. So I'm like, all right, let me see if she's even home. So I go out to where our cars are parked and I see that her car is in the designated spot. So I'm thinking, oh, well, maybe she's with her now husband. But then I go to the street and I see that his car's parked in the street. So I'm like, they're both there. Why the fuck aren't they picking up? But I don't give a fuck what the hell she's doing. I want to go back into my apartment because it's also raining out. So I go to her door and I just start knocking. And she answers. She's on the phone with my parents and she's just like, I just got engaged. I'm like, oh my God, congratulations. Let me the fuck in my apartment. So when it comes to my other sister who just recently got engaged, it was actually the week he wanted to ask my parents permission the week that my mom hurt her finger. So this is a few weeks back. And he comes over, he brings over flowers and chocolates, and I'm actually hanging out with my parents at the time. And the initial thought is, oh, he's just being nice and bringing flowers and chocolates over because he feels bad for my mom about what happened. But no, he was actually trying to utilize that time to ask my parents permission if he could marry my sister. And I'm there, but I also don't want to leave because I'm also like, hey, if I leave, that's going to be a bad look because then I'm just leaving because you're here and it's going to make me look like I'm I don't want to be around you. So kind of put me in an awkward spot. But little to my knowledge, I didn't realize that he actually was hoping I would leave so that way he could have some alone time with my parents. But then the following week was when I ended up going to the Rangers game with my friend. And my sister texts me and she goes, are you going to the Rangers game? And I'm like, yeah. And I guess she was asking for verification purposes because I guess her boyfriend at the time, now fiance, wanted to come over and make sure I wasn't going to be around so I wouldn't rain on his parade there. And I know what you guys are all thinking. Mike, what about you? Are you going to get married? What's your deal? How about you fucking worry about yourself, all right? But yeah, so honestly, does anybody have any other funny lockout stories? I'll give you guys another one. I was actually recently, last summer, I was watching, or maybe this was over the winter, I can't remember. It was more recent than I think. My just frame of mind sucks. I have no concept of time. So I'm watching my parents' dog once, and I went outside. I can't remember if it was I heard something or if I was getting the mail. Something happened where I went outside. But the way that their door locked on the interior, it was a little twist thingy that was on the knob that you would turn it clockwise to lock it and counterclockwise to unlock it. And don't worry, I feel like I could say this because my parents recently got new doors. So if you guys think you're going to go over there and try and pick the lock, you're fucking wrong. Because now the locks are totally fucking different from that setup, thank God. So what ended up happening was I had just assumed that I'd unlocked the door thinking, oh, I'm just going to be going outside. It's not even I'm leaving the premises. It's not like I need to relock the door. So I didn't think to bring a key. And my stupid ass didn't think to verify if the door was actually unlocked. For some reason, my brain just went on autopilot. And I'm like, oh, I'm just going outside. The door's already unlocked. It's fine. So I closed the door behind me. And it wasn't until I got back where I was just like, fuck. I'm also taking care of this dog. How the hell am I going to get inside? But God was definitely on my side because I left one of the living room windows unlocked. So now I'm also thinking I don't want my parents to know that I'm a fucking moron. So I try to sneakily break the screen that's over the window so I could open up the window from the outside. I just kind of put my finger on one of the corners of the screen so I'm able to pull it out. And I open up the window from the outside. I break into my parents' house essentially, and I thought that I had gotten away with it. I was like, all right, this might have actually worked. And when my parents come home, they're just like, so did something happen with the screen? Did somebody try to break in while we were gone? And I was like, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. Just trying to play it off as if nothing happened. But meanwhile, they're just like, yeah, we fucking caught you on the ring. I'm like, son of a bitch. I didn't think the ring saw out that far. But alright guys, that does it for the pod this week. If you liked what you heard, you know the drill. Share this with a friend. Give me that 5-star rating. Give me a review. And if you want to reach out and write in, you know where to find me at lnbemedia@gmail.com. All right, guys, that's it from me. Rangers won. They beat the Hurricanes 4-3 today, so let's go Rangers. If you watch it, enjoy the Tom Brady roast on Netflix. If you're going out for Cinco de Mayo, be safe. Don't be an idiot. And I know it's early, but this pod comes out on Tuesdays, so happy Mother's Day to all you mothers out there. And I'll catch up with you guys next week. Have a good one.